I'm Rob,
I'm Nate.
and welcome back to Rob and Nate Record a Podcast.
It'd be week number 3 of Steve Martin Month. We watched the 2005 movie Shopgirl, screenplay by Steve Martin, adapting his own 2000 novella of the same name, directed by a gentleman,
Anand Tucker.
and starring Steve Martin, Claire Danes, Jason Schwartzman, Bridget Wilson-Sampras, Sam Buttons, Francis Conroy, and various other minor performers. We just finished it literally 2.5 minutes ago. Now, don't you want to ask me what my first impressions are? Isn't that what we discussed earlier?
I would love to get your first impressions first.
Okay. It's interesting that you want my first impression first. I was kind of charmed by it.
I was too.
I liked it. It was in a way more sensual than I thought this thing was going to be coming in. And Jason Schwartzman starts out as Jason Schwartzman at his least appealing. Like, I don't think I've ever disliked him more.
I wanted to dislike him throughout the entirety of the film because of how he is at the beginning of the film.
But he arcs.
Yes.
There's some good arcs in this film, really by everyone, by the three principals. More so Schwartzman and Claire Danes.
Yeah, we should quickly clarify. Claire Danes, her character name is Maribel. She's kind of our central character in the movie.
She is the shop girl.
Yep. And Steve Martin plays Ray Porter. And Jason Schwartzman plays Jeremy.
All right, so just kind of the briefest of overviews of what this is about is Claire Danes is from Vermont. She lives in Los Angeles. She lives in kind of a charming little apartment, and she works in the women's glove department at Saks Fifth Avenue, which is such a retro kind of thing that there's still women's gloves department. And she's at the laundromat, and she meets Jason Schwartzman's Jeremy, who's just this slovenly guy who's poor, and he designs fonts principally for a stereo company. And they have this kind of
An amplifier
company, yeah. And they have this kind of fumbling relationship that he initiates, and she gives him a chance, and then realizes there's not much to this guy. But then she's listening to this radio, like an NPR thing, about how women need the stimulation of touch and hugging, and even if the guy, you don't really like him, it's still good for you. And so she literally fishes his phone number out of the dumpster and calls him over. They have an awkward night together, and Jeremy is obsessed with he thinks that his boss is keeping the amp company from being prosperous because he just doesn't know how to sell it. And so he pitches this idea to his boss of him going on the road with a rock band. It's like, who do rock bands hang out with? Other rock bands. What do they need? Amplifiers. And the boss actually goes for it. And he ends up on tour with this band, Hot Tier. Yeah. And then he kind of goes over to this side plot, and you're kind of wondering why we're even still following him or why he's in this movie.
Yeah.
And the principal plot has to do with Claire Danes Meredith's relationship to Steve Martin's character,
Maribel.
Ray Porter. Maribel, yeah.
Yeah.
And Ray Porter he describes himself as a logician?
Something like that.
He's kind of a number symbols guy, and he works for Silicon Valley, so he has a home up in Seattle, or not Silicon Valley, but in the tech industry. So there's a home up in Seattle and one in Los Angeles, and then he has to travel fairly frequently. And he just sees Maribel at Saks Fifth Avenue, has a conversation with her, buys some gloves, and then sends her the gloves to her address, which he managed to finagle through some subterfuge, with an invitation to go to dinner with him. And he is over 50, and she is probably in her mid-20s. And they start to have a relationship. And there's a wonderful scene where they're describing the relationship to different parties. He's describing it to, I guess, his psychiatrist.
Yeah.
It's like, I told her that, it's nothing's going to come of this, and blah, blah, blah. And she's talking to some friends at work, and it's like, and she might even stop traveling altogether to be with me. And it's about that relationship and how it develops and has its ups and downs, and eventually it ends, and how Jeremy has just so taken with Maribel that he literally changes his life. And when he comes back from tour, he's basically kind of a different person. He's been listening to a lot of self-help books. I've been reading a lot of self-help books on tape. And the guy that's the head of the band ends up being kind of this kind of mentor figure to him. And he's like, why are you getting that silly relationship stuff? You need it, man.
Well, and he says, at one point he's like, well, just get them all. And he's like, well, that's a lot of books. And he goes, well, we're on tour till like February.
Yeah. And it's funny how that guy just like kind of takes to him and they're like, come with us. It's like, we got a bunk.
Well,
and
the first time that they, like after the concert, the first time that they met, he's like, you want to come and do some drugs with us? And he's like, I think I'm just going to say no. He's like, good idea. Yeah.
But yeah, so, I mean, it's got those two storylines. They eventually converge at the end. There's also a couple minor storylines. You get to see Maribel's parents. And she has this throwaway line about her dad hasn't talked much since Vietnam. And they're just the few minutes that you have of them, it's like you get this whole sense of how quiet
their life
there must have been. And Frances Conroy's her mom, and they're just quiet people. And so she comes to visit them for Christmas, and they hardly say anything to each other. And then there's arguably the funnest subplot is where the Bridget Wilson-Sampras character, who's this very blonde Californian lady in the perfume counter who's kind of a frenemy to Maribel, sees her wearing this real nice dress and contacts one of her friends in the store and says, well, did you sell one of these size 2 dresses last? Yeah, well, who bought it? And they should be doing this. Looks up the credit cards. It's like, oh, Ray Porter. It's like, Ray Porter. And so when she sees Maribel, so Lisa's the name of Bridget Wilson-Sampras' character. Lisa sees Maribel coming into this gallery event with Jeremy, who they just happened to have arrived at the same time.
They met in the parking lot.
And they're walking in together. And she thinks that Jeremy is Ray Porter. Knows that Ray Porter is rich and wants to snatch him away from Maribel. And Jeremy's just kind of like, she is coming on really strong today. I am not used to this.
But then it's funny because she's like, I know who you are. And he's like, do you? And she says Ray, and he's like,
yeah, it's like Lisa Ray. Oh, Lisa Ray.
Yeah.
It's like, funny sense of humor.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was kind of delightful.
Well, and she takes him back to her apartment and spends the night with him. Mm-hmm. And it's a central moment as she's rocking back and forth on him and is going, oh, Ray. And he's like, oh, Ray.
It's like, oh, Ray.
And he calls her the next day and he's like,
with it.
and she's like, who's this? And he's like, Jeremy. And she's like, who? Like, blah, blah, blah. And then she finally realizes what she's done. And yeah,
it's great. Yeah, what are some of your thoughts about this movie?
I'm kind of like you. I thought this was surprisingly charming. I did not expect to be charmed coming into tonight. And I did not expect to like this movie quite as much as I did. It's
very low key.
It is very low key. It's got a nice tempo throughout. Yeah. It's very even keel. It's kind of subtle throughout the vast majority of the movie. We know that, like, Maribel's talked about how she does a little bit of art and she occasionally sells a few pieces of art, but you only see her working on one piece of art throughout this film, and it's this like constant work throughout the movie in various fits and spurts. But at some point she leaves her job at Saks Fifth Avenue kind of later in the movie, and she gets a job at this gallery, and pretty soon, like, one of the names outside the gallery is Maribel Buttersfield, and they're showing her work. And it just so happens that Ray wanders in on the night that they're showing her work, and she wants to give him the piece of art that she made while they were together, but she's there with Jeremy, who's very proud that his girlfriend's art
did that.
Yeah, is on display, and it just was really charming. And the way the relationship develops with Maribel and Jeremy at the very end of the movie, it really kind of won me over. I expected that was going to come back, and throughout the vast majority of the movie, I didn't want it to happen. Mm-hmm. And just the way Jeremy's character arcs at the end, you were content with it.
Yeah, you were like, good for him. It's like, and that's really kind of the ideal thing with a relationship, is that it makes the other person want to be better. And Maribel and Jeremy got to where they wanted to be better for each other. Ray never could. And that was his shortcoming.
Well, but he realizes afterwards, like at the end of the movie, he realizes like what he chose for himself, what he missed out on, and he's kind of disappointed.
He has that narration, because he narrates a little bit in the film.
At the very end.
The very beginning, very end, there's some narration from Ray, and he talks about how he puzzled to himself how he could miss a person that he went out of his way not to fully...
That he went out of his way to keep it a distance.
So that he would not miss her when she was gone.
Yeah.
And, he's twice her age. He's a divorcee. There's obviously a lot of backstory to him. He can get women easily, as we see throughout the film. And he sees this girl. It's like, I want to see if I can charm her. And does have an affection for her. But as she asks at one point, why can't you love me?
Yeah.
Because she can't kind of quite do that. He does say at the end at the gallery, it's like, I did love you. And he did.
Yeah.
But only partway.
Well, and he didn't realize it till after she was gone.
Yeah, how much that he did.
Yeah.
And there were times like when he sleeps with that other woman and later tells her by letter, because like I was worried I'd chicken out midway through if I didn't write it down for you. And he talks about, you want to hear the stupidest thing of all? I didn't think it would matter. That there was part of him was like, I'm getting to like her too much. I need to kind of sabotage this. But, you like all the characters. They all had their foibles. They were very human.
Except for maybe Lisa.
But Lisa gets hers, so that works out.
Yeah, this was just a charming, pleasant film. I don't feel like there's an excessive amount to say.
And that was one of the things that's going to kind of come into the ratings and stuff on this for me. Because I really enjoyed it. But it's not great. It doesn't aim to be. It's not that deep. It's got a simple story. It's based on a novella. It is a novella of a movie.
Uh-huh.
And it says everything it needs to say. It's not all on the surface. Some of it's a little bit deeper, but it's not deep.
Yeah.
But do we want to do the ratings now, or did we want to?
Sure, go for it.
I'm going to give it 3 stars, and I think I would give it like 7.5 on the 10-star scale.
Yeah.
I'd probably round it up to 8 if I had to round.
I was going to say I'm going to give it 3 and 8, which kind of surprised me. So tonight we were debating between Steve Martin's 2001 movie Novocaine and this 2005 Shopgirl. And I think part of the reason we picked Shopgirl was because it had a slightly higher rating.
Yeah.
But we're talking, like, this has an aggregate score on IMDb of 6.3 stars, and Novocaine had an aggregate score of, like, 5.8. So it was a marginal difference in the score. But having watched this tonight, I am a little bit surprised that its rating on IMDb is so low. Its Metacritic score was 62.
And it has a 61% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Which strikes me as a little bit low.
Yeah, I would say. Have you ever read Steve Martin? Anything he's written?
I've read one of his books. I forget the name of it off the top of my head, but I've definitely added this one to my list.
Yeah, I audiobooked one of his kind of short little vignette books. They're not even short stories. They're little kind of... the one I remember is it's like an ad for a drug, and then it's like 4 or 5 pages worth of side effects that might happen. They get like super detailed.
Yeah.
But that was probably around 18 years ago. But he's been doing little cartoons for the New Yorker. Somebody else draw them, but he writes them, and I've been following those online, and he's got a very dry sense of humor to him.
Oh, yeah.
You know something that occurred to me today as I was looking, and I was looking at the age differences. So Steve Martin was born in 1945. Claire Danes was born in 1979. So Steve Martin's not a baby boomer. I always thought of him as a baby boomer, but he's a member of that silent generation.
No, he was not older, but he was above average age by the time he did like some of the Saturday Night Live stuff and, broke out from that. And
I think maybe that has some
I don't know, I think he's very talented.
Stick. He is a wonderfully talented
guy
that has a lot of perceptiveness to him.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It was a really fun performance in this, too.
Yeah, it's a very straight, flat, restrained performance. We've made the comment before that sometimes comedians are better in dramatic roles, or they do very well in dramatic roles, and this is a good example.
They get the subtleties, which you wouldn't expect from this stereotyped version of a comedian you might have.
Well,
in
I
your
think
head.
that actually is the case because they know the subtleties that make people laugh. So they can see some of the other subtleties and know how to share those. Or at least that's my take on it. So, yeah.
Was it Edmund Gwen that reportedly said he's on his deathbed and his son's there? It's like, Dad, is it hard? Dying is easy. Comedy is hard. And that's what can make comedians such solid dramatic actors, because in a way it's easier. What they're used to doing.
I did not see a budget for this film. It had an opening weekend of a mere $229,000.
Okay.
It had a domestic gross of $10.2 million and a worldwide gross of $11.6. It's not a big moneymaker, depending on how much you put into this, but are you ready for some trivia?
Sure.
From IMDb. For the scene on Maribel's bedroom where the cat jumps on the bed and watches her and Jeremy, there were actually 2 cats used. The director explains in his commentary that one could jump but never watched, and the other was good at watching but couldn't jump. Alternate casting for the part of Ray.
Okay.
Any ideas?
Oh, surprised me.
Steve Martin had Tom Hanks in mind to play Ray Porter.
No.
But as the film's development progressed, he felt he was better suited to play the part since he was so familiar with the work. Jimmy Fallon was cast as Jeremy, but eventually dropped out.
That's good.
I think that might have worked. I would have probably rooted for a Jimmy Fallon character more.
He wouldn't have been as pathetic at the beginning.
I don't think he would have been able to play it as straight as Jason Schwartzman does.
Yeah.
So, Claire Danes took her clothes off for Maribel's first love scene with Martin's character, a moment that left the actress uneasy. A friend told her, "It's good you're doing it at 25. When you're 80, you'll look back on this and think, I was pretty firm, so there's that." It was uncomfortable, I have to say, but I did think that it was relevant and useful, Danes said. Also, it's erotic. There's no reason to pussyfoot around that. I thought it was vital, though, so I stripped.
She comes on a little bit aggressive to him when he takes her home, and
Yeah.
I was a little surprised when he comes back to the room and she's disrobed.
Well, but she's also not. It's not excessively gratuitous either.
No.
Yeah. During her 2001 arrest for shoplifting, Winona Ryder told a security guard at the Saks Fifth Avenue department store in Beverly Hills that her stealing was merely a part for her preparation for a role in this film. One last item. The morning after Maribel and Ray have sex for the first time, Ray is making them toast for breakfast and puts out Knott's Berry Farms brand jam. Did you notice that?
Okay.
A young Steve Martin performed with the comedy troupe at the Knott's Berry Farm theme park. So that's why he inserted that there. Yeah, just a fun, charming movie.
Not for all audiences.
It is rated R, though it's kind of a soft R. It's probably basically just got to be for...
He had a little bit of nudity in it.
Yeah, but there's not excessive language or anything of that nature, so, yeah. I would recommend this movie. We've given our ratings.
Yeah, and it doesn't... Like you, I'm a little curious about that book now.
Yeah.
And see how close it is.
Oh, it's already on my Goodreads list. So, yeah. If there's nothing else, I'm Rob.
I'm Nate.
And this is Rob and Nate Record a Podcast.
I'll conduct.
What?
I'll host.
I want your first impressions first, though.
All right, that's fine.
Okay. That was fun.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah,
not
too
quite
long.
what I thought it would be.
An hour and 46 minutes, relatively short, but it accomplished what it needed to. So, yeah. You got any ad sponsors for us?
Not really.
Can't come up with something about Coke?
About Coke. Maybe we were at Saks Fifth Avenue.
The pause that refreshes?